let's say I just downloaded my data and I opened it up in Excel that I got from Storit. And the first thing I noticed is that there's just a lot of data and kind of overwhelmed by what's on this sheet. So what I want to do is organize it, clean it up, pick the data that I want, and make a new Excel spreadsheet essentially with just the data that I'm interested in. So the first thing I want to do is figure out what my columns are. And some of these I'm just not going to know. They're identifiers based on what USGS and EPA has coded that area. There may be GPS data. Certainly the county is in here. Visit number, I guess that's how many times they visited the site. Not entirely sure what that means. Activity ID, that's probably the actual site, the ID for that specific area, or it could be the person that went and did it. So sometimes, unless you kind of dig into what these are coded as, you may not know offhand. But the next thing I see in this column L, it says activity st, and then there's just a bunch of hashtags. And what those hashtags tell me is that there's actually values in there that are too long to be shown with how wide this column is. So what I want to do is I want to extend this column. So I can do two things. Come up to the column, and once I see this bar with the arrows, that tells me I can extend the column width. So I could just drag it out and make it big enough to actually see, oh, those were dates and those were times. The other thing I could do is if I'm in here and I see any type of hashtag data which shows me that the column's not wide enough, I could come up to the edge of the column. I see my line with my arrows again, and I can double click on it. And when I double click, Excel will actually make it just wide enough to show all the data. So I come in here and I say, okay, data is probably, or data time, excuse me, of sample is probably really important. So activity start is something I want to write down that I probably want. The next thing I want to figure out is what are they actually testing for? And when I came through, I kind of looked and I saw, oh, fecal coliform. I know that's something to test for. So maybe characteristic name is what they're testing for. So to check, I'm just going to scroll down and see what else is under this column S. And I notice that it's mercury values, chromium values, sodium, cadmium, copper, total solids, dissolved oxygen. Okay, so right off the bat, I know characteristic name is what they were testing for. So right now I'm interested, again, in activity start and characteristic name. The next thing I probably want to know is what are the values that they found for these different tests. And I come across and I look at the different columns, and there's one called result value that actually has results. So now I want to sort my data because right now it's a big mess. Why did they start with fecal coliforms and then go to phosphates and then DO? It's really hard to find what I want. So I'm going to come in and sort. And to do that, I go to Data, Sort. And the first thing I want to make sure is that this box is checked. My list has headers because my list actually has titles or headers over all the columns. So that's good. Sort by, and I want to pick my column. And the first thing I'm interested in sorting by is characteristic name because I want to sort by the type of test. And not only do I want to sort by the test, but I also want to sort by the values they got, so lowest to high maybe. So I come in here and add a level. So I want to sort by characteristic name, then by, and I come in and select result value, which is right here as number. So how do I want these? Do I want smallest to largest? Do I want A to Z? It's going to recognize, is it a number? Is it text? What am I actually sorting for? So I also want to then sort by date. So I'm going to add a level, then by sort by activity start. So I'm going to hit OK. So Excel's going to think for a second, and then you'll notice it's sorted my data. And if I come over to characteristic name right now, you can actually see that now it's sorted by alphabetically what test was done. So now I can sort of clean up my data, so to speak. So let's say I want to just look at alkalinity for all of this data. Well, I could come in here, and the first thing I might want to do is copy this entire sheet over to a new sheet. And I'll show you why I'm going to do that for a second. But I'm going to hit Command A, Control A if you're on a PC. I'm working on a Mac, so Command A is going to highlight everything. And then I want to copy it, so I'm going to hit Control C or Command C. You could also right click and copy, or you can come up and go edit, copy. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a clean sheet and I'm going to paste all of that data. So I'm just copying the entire sheet over, and again, it'll make sense in a second why I'm doing that. But I'm going to select A1 and I'm going to hit Command V or Control V to paste. I could also come up and go edit, paste. I could come up here and right click and hit paste. Either one's going to do the same thing. So it's going to think for a second because it is a lot of data. But now I'm only interested in activity start, I'm only interested in characteristic name, and I'm only interested in result value. So I'm actually going to highlight everything that I don't want, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to hit hide. And basically that data is still there. You'll notice it's starting with column L. It's just hidden in Excel. And the reason I like to do this on a new sheet rather than the first sheet is that just in case I want to go back and see something, I still have all that data back in that original sheet. So again, how I did that to highlight everything is I came up to the top of my column until I got this downward arrow. I clicked on it, and while holding the left click, I dragged over all the columns that I wanted to hide. So I wanted to hide now everything from M to R because I'm not interested in these columns right now. So I'm going to right click again and hit hide. So do that a couple more times just to hide the rest of the data that I'm not interested in right now, until finally I get just the data that I'm interested in. And again, this you can see is cut off. I'm going to come up to my line with my arrows. I'm going to double click, and now I have just the data that I'm interested in. You'll notice I have all the alkalinity data. It's got result value, and it has units. Now, let's say at this point I don't like the way it's sorted. Maybe it didn't make sense to sort by result value, but more sense to result by activity start date, because I'm looking at it and the activity start date seems to be all over the place. If we look at alkalinity, it goes from 84 to 86 to 82. And the reason it does that is because we told Excel the highest priority is to sort by characteristics name. The second priority was result value. So maybe I'm actually more interested in sorting by date. So I come in here and I go data, sort again. Oh, sorry, I need to click my data that I want to sort. So I want to sort all this data. I'm going to go to data, sort, and I want to sort by characteristic name, then by activity start date, then by result value. Click OK. So now you'll notice what my data did was it sorted by still the characteristic name first, but then next by date. And that might be more helpful because maybe I'm going to group this data by year, by decade, something that makes a little bit more sense. And so now you have your new sheet with your cleaner data sorted by date. And if you'll notice, at this point, you can sort of make it as organized as you want.